All right, today we are talking about wall treatments, and that basically means anything that you could use in a design to decorate a wall. Treatment refers to whatever choice you make to put on something. Like we have wall treatments, we have window treatments, we have floor treatments. It's whatever material or design you're putting on that surface. And I started with this image because that's a very interesting choice. I kind of like it. I do like how bold it is. It makes a lot of texture in that room. And do you notice how some of the blocks of wood stick out further and they've created like hidden almost shelves. If you took the stuff off of them, you might not notice that they were built in there as shelves. So that's a pretty interesting idea. And they've carried that same concept over here into their coffee tables, which all of this is elements and principles of design working together. But yeah, that's a neat wall treatment to start with. So the first one we want to talk about, and you're expected to be writing these down. I've said this 100 times, not really. This is only day 43 of school, I believe, so I've said this 43 times. Be writing this down. It goes in your head once when you see it, once when you hear it, once when you write it, and a fourth time when you have a picture. And I usually give you pictures, and I'm going to today. Um, so there is so many benefits to doing all of those things: the writing, the seeing, the listening, um, and the picture, the visual. You're meeting all those aspects of learning. So, um, wood is the first treatment I want to talk about. When we use wood in a space, on any surface, it adds warmth and texture to the space. You can have no wood in a space at all, and then you add wood to it, and all of a sudden it just feels warmer. It feels more homey, more cozy, more inviting. It gives a casual feel depending on the material, or it can do a sophisticated feel depending on the material. If we look at this use of wood on the wall, this is very much a casual feel. It's laid back. It's a room you could just like hang out in, chill with your friends, read a book, drink some coffee. It's casual. Then you can do this fancy, slick, very uniform wood, like in this picture, and it's very much sophisticated. It's businessy. It's formal. It's fancy. It follows the rules. It's a totally different feel between these two pictures, but they're both wood. Either way, though, it is warm and its texture. You can also have a painted or stained finish on wood. The lower picture, the fancier picture, is a stained finish, which means you've taken bare wood, like is what is in the top picture, and you've applied a stain to it to give it that color, that reddish brown color. And then they've probably taken some type of top coat or clear coat to make it shiny like that. If you don't add any stain or paint to it, it's going to have a look more like this top picture with natural wood. These grayish kind of colored pieces, those are probably just weathered, and they will weather in different colors or different neutrals, depending on what type of wood they are and what elements they are in. Elements meaning what type of weather they're in. Um, the wood could be what the wall is actually made of, or it could be some type of treatment put over top of drywall later on. So in this top picture, again, I would guess that a room was built, they had drywall on their walls, which we've learned about drywall, um, and they decided later they wanted to put wood on it like that. So they just nailed up all these miscellaneous boards to get that effect. So there's drywall first, and the wood was an afterthought. Or, down here in this lower picture, I would venture to guess that those walls are actually made out of that wood. There's probably no drywall behind that wood. It's just stuck straight on there and insulated in between. More things dealing with wood. These are less rugged or formal looking. They're kind of somewhere in the middle. Wainscoting looks like it's pronounced wainscoting, but it's wainscoting, which is what you use around the bottom portion of a wall. It is a very formal look, but it's not as formal as the walls in that last slide. It's typically in dining rooms, stairs, or hallways. So you see how it is just on like the bottom third or fourth of the wall. Um, that's as far up as it goes, not very far up the wall. And see how it has these rectangular panels on the wall. That is another characteristic of wainscoting, is these rectangular panels, almost like picture frames attached to the wall. Um, its purpose, its main purpose, is to just protect the bottom of the wall. In this case, that looks like it's a dining room based on the chandelier. But its main purpose there would be like so you don't scoot chairs into the wall. In hallways or in stairways, it could be so that you don't run your fingers up the wall. Like on sheetrock where your fingerprints would stain it, it's not going to stain the wainscoting near as much because it has a shiny finish and it's not as porous, which means it wouldn't accept as much dirt. The second option we have here is board and batten. This is a very popular thing to do right now. I love it. Um, it's used on the bottom 2/3 of the wall, meaning see how it goes further up the wall than this wainscoting did. So this is about a third of the wall. This is about 2/3 of the wall. It's a casual look, but it still looks very put together. So not as fancy as the last slide, but not as casual as the other last slide. It's very common in bathrooms, foyers, and currently it's a thing to put it in nurseries, which is what this second picture is here that I have. So this is in a bathroom. It can be made out of, it's typically made out of wood. It could also be made out of fiberglass. But the fact that it's made out of wood is good for bathrooms because if something were to happen in this bathroom and it were to flood, it's not going to ruin your walls if you have board and batten or a form of wood on it, like it would if you had bare sheetrock on your wall. Sheetrock would get wet and it would get wavy or it would just like disintegrate because remember, it's just made out of particles of gypsum held together by paper. And what happens when paper and basically dirt get wet? I mean, they disintegrate. But wood, it won't happen, and it's made out of a hard wood um, that is not going to bubble up or anything. So that's why it's really common in bathrooms for that. Um, I do want to point out in this picture saying that it's currently common in nurseries. They just did it on like one wall. It's very much an accent wall type of thing to do in rooms right now. Also want to say that these two pictures that are outlined in red, you do not have. Any pictures outlined in red in this presentation I did not give you. One more slide for wood, I think. Is that the last one? No. Wait. Yes, that's the last straight wood slide. Shiplap, which I know we've mentioned in this class before, is used as an afterthought now, but initially walls were made of shiplap only. And then they evolved into being made out of shiplap, and then people would spread plaster all over them. Now we have our sheetrock drywall type of walls, but back then that was what they're made out of. Now people put shiplap on a wall after they've put gypsum board or drywall on a wall to give it that look, that texture, those horizontal lines. Commonly it's known as in farmhouse design, farmhouse style, but it's also in that bohemian and Scandinavian category if you use it in the right way with the right accessories. It's not found in any particular room anymore. It's really found all over the place. Um, so it's just really common. Next is an artistic use of wood, and there is no one specific name for this way to use wood. It's whatever. So it's used to create interest or texture or rhythm in a room. See these elements and principles coming up? Texture is an element, rhythm is a principle. Look at that, working together. The pieces are applied in a non-conventional or artistic way to the wall, and their purpose is to get your attention. It's very cool. So like this one here on the left, they've covered a pretty large wall, it looks like, with this wooden texture, and it's very, trying to find a better word than interesting, but it's very interesting, I don't know. But it's not super in your face either. because everything's the same color. Then look at this picture on the right, outlined in red. You don't have it. They've covered a much smaller space with the artistic use of wood, and it's even more subtle because it's black. Now, if you're a visual person and you can imagine this, do this with me. Imagine that the background of this was still black, but then all of these skinny pieces of wood that they've put on the surface were white. That'd be super contrasty. That would be rhythm by opposition because that's black and white opposition. But think about how much more that would stand out um, and be really dramatic. So it's a subtle way to do things with wood. Next up is trim and molding, which are all of these outlines in your rooms basically. Baseboards is the wooden trim around the bottom of the wall. It touches the floor. You have this in all rooms all the time. You basically have to, or you can see where your wood or your carpet or whatever material you have is glued down to the floor, and that's just kind of not good looking. So look at your room right now, whatever room you're in, look at the baseboard. Do you have baseboards? I bet 100% of you are saying yes right now. That is baseboard. Think base, bottom. That's what base means. The purpose of it is to prevent scuffs on the wall. It gives a finished look, it gives a clean look, and sometimes it is thicker like this, or sometimes it's a lot thinner, which was a more common thing to do in like the 90s and early 2000s, but now it's kind of coming back to thicker baseboards like that. So look at your baseboards and notice if it's thick or if it's thin, how many curves and details it has on it, or if it's just like a straight sheet almost like this picture. Next is crown molding. And look around the room that you're in right now. Do you have what looks like a baseboard on the top of your wall? I bet most of you do not, but maybe you have one somewhere in your home, like in a dining room or living room or kitchen. It might be more common in those rooms. Not very common in bedrooms, unless it's a master bedroom. And it looks like baseboards, but they're on the wall. And you know, a crown goes on your head, like on the top. So it is crown molding. Here is a pretty common version of crown. In this picture right here, this is like really thick crown. And every single different piece of wood you see in this design is bought separately and glued together to make this design. It's a very expensive thing to do. So when you see like a real estate ad and it'll say like crown molding throughout, that's supposed to be a selling point because that means that someone took the time and the money to go ahead and put crown molding up, and you don't have to. The house already comes with it. It's supposed to be a good thing. Its purpose is similar to the baseboards to give a finished look, but it's also just a sign of formality or of quality. Formality meaning like this house is probably fancier if it has crown molding. Your cheaper, simpler houses are not going to have it. More trim and molding. You know what a cased opening is already. We know that it is this picture. But just note that it has molding, which is the generic term for fancy carved wood that outlines something around it. That is the cased part of a cased opening. A chair rail is this strip of white molding around the wall. It's kind of at the top of, if we go back over, here, it's like at the top of this wainscoting right there, top of that wainscoting. And but you can have just a chair rail. Like there's no wainscoting under the chair rail in this picture. It's just two different colors of wall. The purpose of a chair rail is literally so if you look at the back of a chair, like next time you go into your dining room or go in there right now and look at the back of a chair, like from the side, its profile, there is a point on it that curves out the most. That part that curves out the most is always at the same height. It's a standard height, and I honestly don't remember how many inches it is. I need to look it up again. But it's the same number for every chair. Chair designers know that the part that curves out the most is supposed to be at this specific number every single time. That is where the chair rail gets placed up the wall. And its purpose is so that when you scoot your chair out and it hits the wall, it hits the chair rail and not the wall. Because if that chair hits the wall, it's most likely going to scuff the paint or make a dent in the wall. But if it hits the chair rail, it's not going to, because that chair rail is made out of wood, which is much harder to dent than your sheetrock. And chair rail is also going to be covered in a glossy paint, which we haven't learned this yet, but glossy paint, the shinier it is, the glossier it is, the more protective it is. Girls, it's like putting clear coat on your nails. Boys, it's like putting clear coat on cars or whatever you spray paint and stuff. The more glossy it is, the more protective it is. So you scoot that chair out and it hits the chair rail instead of denting your wall. It's just like a protective, decorative item. Next is wall tile. And we have large tile and we have backsplashes. So large tile could be used like this to cover an entire room or one big wall. It's used a lot in bathrooms, like in this picture. And you do not have this picture, remember. Or there are backsplashes, which are smaller tiles that don't always, well, they can, but they don't usually cover an entire wall like large tile does. It comes on a little sheet of mesh, and it makes installation way faster. And instead of having to install all these little teeny tiny tiles individually, they come on like a 1 foot by 1 foot sheet, and you stick the entire sheet on the wall at a time. Usually they're used in kitchens like this or in bathrooms. So think about if you have any wall tile in your house. And if you don't, notice the wall tile anytime you're out in public. Like public bathrooms usually have wall tile because it's much more sanitary and it's a quick way to cover the wall in something interesting, and in theory it should never have to be redone. Where if you had just paint on your wall, it would have to be redone because it would get scuffed all the time. And that is the end of wall treatments. So take a look at your walls today. What do you have in your home? Also note that, remember in your assignments today, you are supposed to be doing your questions that go with this video, the 10-15 questions. So don't forget them. They are both part of this assignment. It's basically like your nightly videos would be, but that's what you're doing in class today. Thank you.